Welcome to another edition of The Brand Called You. Today we have a really accomplished entrepreneur who was a manager earlier. Poornima, Vardhan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Poornima is the founder and CEO of 335th. She was an investment banker, she's an MBA from Wharton, and she was at LSE and from St. Stephen's. So Poornima, tell me a little bit about your early career.
You know, in my earlier life, as I like to call it, I was an out-and-out maths and finance professional. So in my undergraduate, I studied mathematics from St. Stephen's. Then I went on to do applicable mathematics, which is operational research from the London School of Economics. And then after that, I was working in Ernst & Young for a period of about 2 years, where I was looking at sort of standard operating procedures for building businesses. So basically the building blocks of any business. And then I went on to study finance and accounting at Wharton. And after that, I think one of the things that I really was interested in was accounting and finance. So I started working with the UBS Investment Bank in the M&A team in New York. And, you know, after that was sort of my previous life. And after that, I sort of took a call that I always wanted to start my own business. And I was looking for ideas. And I think the consumer space at that time in India was very interesting. Because obviously the consumer preferences, the disposable income and all the economic, the macro data is really in favor of the consumer segment in India. And I think that's a space that I personally find very interesting. So I sort of decided to leave my job and then move back and sort of work on my own business.
Wonderful. So, you moved back and you set up 335th.
Yeah.
Fascinating name.
Thank you.
Tell me about the name.
You know, I am a numbers person, first of all. So I love numbers. I love numbers a lot more than I like names. So I think when I was thinking of a name, I was looking at, I wanted something more global, because it's something that I want to look at from a global perspective, not just an Indian perspective. I wanted a gender neutral name, because also we would be expanding into different segments, etc. So I always wanted that. And so 335th was the address at where I sort of took that decision that, I'm going to actually quit my job and sort of start my entrepreneurial journey. So I think that's the essence and that's the significance of 335th.
When I first saw 335th, I thought I was misreading because, you were in the US. I thought this was something from, 35th and 3rd or something like that. Very Manhattan kind of.
It is very Manhattan because it was in New York at the time, because I was living in New York. Yeah. But, it also has a very, as I said, it's a very global name. It's and also from a marketing perspective, it's a much more recallable name. Even though people butcher the name, they call it 365, 355 and all that. But they still remember 335th. They remember that there's a brand called 335th versus if I call it Poornima, or, it's a slightly more common name. So I find it very interesting. So that was the reason behind calling it 335th.
Very interesting. So, the brand has evolved ever since you started. How are you positioning your brand now?
So, yes, when we started, we wanted to focus on sort of the office wear market that we started with. However, over the last 5 years that we've been in business, I've understood the market really well. And I think what we are looking at doing is we're sort of looking at the Indian ethnic wear women's market. And it's a 15 billion market today, and it's going to be a $50 billion market in the next 20 years. And then, so, that's really the soft spot for us. And we're looking at establishing and creating a bridge to luxury brand in that segment, specifically for women's wear. That's what we're targeting.
So help me understand, what is the meaning of bridge to luxury?
So, right now, although in the last 15 to 20 years that all the growth we've seen in the consumer side for apparel has been in the sort of 2,000 to 8,000 rupees range, which is, so below 2,000, we call it the mass range, which is at 2,000 to 8,000 is the premium. So what we're targeting is bridge to luxury, is sort of, it's a luxurious experience. It's a fashion forward experience where, one of the problems in India, or one of the things that's missing in the Indian fashion scene or the apparel scene, is that what you see on the ramp is not really reaching the masses. And we want to change that. We want to connect the ramp to the road, as we call it. And, so really bringing people to sort of try and, wear things that they see on the ramp and on a slightly more bigger mass scale than just celebrities or like a top 1 or 0.5% of the country. And I think that's what the idea behind Bridge to Luxury is. Our price points remain between 10,000 to about 40,000 rupees, and that's like the segment that we are targeting.
Interesting. I've been involved in building brands, and brands are very, very tough to build.
Very tough.
What have been some of your challenges as you've built 335th? I mean, you did mention people massacred the name.
I think the biggest challenge is building a brand, as you would know, takes a lot of time.
Correct.
It's not something you can build overnight. You can get PR and you can do all of that, but that's like one off, or even on a consistent basis, but building a brand takes years. And I think that's been, and I'm an impatient person because, just today,
Correct.
our generation is such that we look at like,
you're a person in a hurry.
yeah, and I think that's been the biggest learning that, it's not something that can be done overnight. And that's why brands create once you create that brand, you can charge such a premium, even not just in terms of pricing, but even in terms of valuation and looking at the kind of exits that internationally fashion or, retail has been getting. So, it's very tough. It's a long-term game. I think the way to think about it is that building a brand is a long-term game. It's not for people who are looking at a short-term, come into the business and sort of exit. It's not something that's going to happen, which we've seen, because that's the reason why a lot of e-commerce companies that started in the spaces have already crashed and burned.
Correct.
Because this is a 15 to 20 year business horizon. So anyone who's interested in doing a little less, I would not recommend. And I get a lot of people asking, they want to start a business, and I tell them the same thing, that, if you're interested in this segment in the fashion of business, in the business of fashion, then you're looking at a long-term horizon, because that's the amount of time it takes to create a brand and sort of get that, So I think that's the biggest learning that I've had.
Very interesting. And, talking of fashion, now fashion is constantly evolving, constantly changing.
Yeah.
How do you manage to stay ahead of the curve? I mean, suddenly you have different colors, suddenly you have different styles, suddenly something changes.
It's very interesting when you talk about fashion in India. So the one thing that in India we don't have is we don't have trends according to that specific season. So if you compare the Indian market versus the international market actually moves very fast, because you have seasons and everyone
Correct.
buys according to that season.
Correct.
India doesn't. You don't have that problem in India, and you don't have that kind of behavior in India, because people are looking, when they invest, most of the high ticket buying happens around events, so marriages and functions and social events, social gatherings, festivals, etc.
Yeah.
One is obviously there are certain trends, so you have all of that, like all those are research reports, and you can do a lot of research on what is going on in the international market versus Indian market. Also, we are very strong on seasons. So in India, it's so hot most of the year that there's certain color palettes that work. And also, so we have our own sense of style, we have our own aesthetic, we have our own sort of language of design, and we incorporate changes based on the seasons, based on certain festivals, based on who we're targeting, and we experiment a little bit. So that's how we really stay ahead of the game.
And over the last 2 decades,
Yeah.
I mean, there is of course the traditional set of office wear that all people do wear, but has this evolved or changed over the last 2 decades? Because I certainly see young people. I have no knowledge of fashion, but I certainly see much more Western influence coming into office wear.
There are a couple of things. I think there are a lot of changes. First of all, I think this is also very lifestyle related. Western wear, it's easy to iron, it's easy to manage, just like the West. So now that people are moving away from homes, they're getting, they're working in corporate offices, and for example, Gurgaon, they don't have that kind of time to or there's no one at home to help them, because cotton kurtas and all, they take a lot of keeping and stuff. So I think Western influence is just coming in for price sensitivity, so you can create something which is much cheaper. So the fast fashion models really hit India as well, because India is a very value conscious market. So that works really well for India, and I think that's one of the reasons that sort of you've seen this change in the way people are dressing. Secondly, I think just the lifestyle changes that we've had now. People have to take a metro, they have to they have to travel, and it's just creasing, etc. It's much easier and much more easier to
And
just
more practical
to wear all of that kind of stuff. Having said that, do I think that Indian ethnic wear will be less because Western influence? I don't think so. I think there's also it's very strongly entrenched in our system. It's also like I feel more comfortable wearing a salwar kurta to a meeting than sometimes so I think different kind of, I think, demographic, different kind of jobs, different kind of lifestyle sort of dictate what kind of clothes you're wearing.
Correct. Very true. And a couple more questions on 335 before I move on. How do you see the rural customer adapting aspirationally to 335th?
So I'm a city girl, right? I've been born and raised in Delhi. I've lived in London and I've lived in New York and I've lived in Philly for a little bit of time. So when this talk about tier 2, tier 3 cities come, when I started, I had no idea. Like, I really had no idea, but I'm constantly amazed at the kind of potential, the kind of aspiration, and the kind of interest people have. Even the smaller cities. So I'll give you a very small example. We have a point of sale in Siliguri, and it does fabulously for us. It does better than Kolkata does for us. So it's like, I think you just have to find the right distribution points. It's sort of also, it takes a lot of trial and error. So I think I wouldn't call it rural actually, because they're actually really urban. It's not the rural. Rural has become tier 6 now. So you're looking at Ranchi, you're looking at Bhopal, you're looking at Raipur, you're looking at Nagpur. These are all cities with a lot of and we have distribution in all these cities, and there is a lot of capacity to consume certain kind of luxury products, especially if you give them really good service. I think that's something that brands have not been able to do actually. Offer them style, offer them at an affordable price point, but also offer them a certain service that people like. And we do that, and we do fabulously well in these cities. I was myself amazed at the kind of response in these smaller cities, Jaipur, Udaipur. But I'm amazed, and I think there's a huge potential that I think we're already working towards, and we have distribution points in a lot of these cities.
That's fascinating.
But I really think that the real growth is going to come out of there. India, in Delhi, Bombay, these are very saturated cities, and there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of market. But some of the smaller cities, people are not targeting, and I think those are very interesting for us as a distribution point.
Very interesting.
They are price conscious and value conscious though. So, only one person may buy something upwards of a 25 lakh rupee garment. But like if you price it right between, I say 10 and 40, I think I personally think there's a lot of absolutely.
Amazing. So, Poornima, one more question, and that's about millennials. How are millennials changing the fashion business or the bridge to luxury business?
It's interesting. So we work in the Indian ethnic wear market, and I think not a lot of it has changed because of the millennials. You can add a little bit of more styling and trims, etc. But otherwise, I think it's very interesting that the Indian ethnic wear market specifically has been foolproof. Like, there have been very little changes. The silhouettes have changed and colors have changed. People have stopped, most of the weddings are now day weddings. So people have stopped wearing very
heavy stuff,
dark colored, ornate stuff, which used to be there. There is a certain segment that still wears that. But however, like, the general broader trend is toward lighter, softer colors, pastels, etc. So in that context, I think the Indian ethnic wear market, which is still remains the same and is just growing, actually very synonymous to the regional newspaper market. That is not, because newspapers, English newspapers are not being consumed in the same way, that doesn't mean that regional newspapers are in fact doing much better. It's the same, I think, with the Indian ethnic wear market, where you have everyone's consuming now because there's a lot more disposable income. People are aspirational. So the one interesting thing that has changed because of millennials is they're very aspirational. They just don't want to go to Chandni Chowk and pick up something or something, but they want a certain kind of quality. They want a certain kind of service. They want to, they want to go to a nice store. They want to feel. They want to have that experiential experience when they're buying something from a brand. So I think that is really changing, earlier people used to make their own clothes, etc. But now, the hassle of doing all of that, it's very expensive. Secondly, I think people are really looking for the experiences, So I think that has changed because of the millennials.
That's very well said. So, Poornima, let's move to the second part, and you transition from being what I call a professional manager to an entrepreneur. So I want to ask you some questions on your journey as a startup or an entrepreneur. I've spoken to lots of startup people, and I always wonder, for a startup entrepreneur, should you go solo or should you have a co-founder?
It's an interesting question because I'm a solo entrepreneur, and I think the reason behind that is that I like to take my own decisions. I don't like anyone else taking my decisions for me. So I think that again, like, that depends on person to person. There are, one really has to understand what their style of management is, and sort of um, adapt accordingly. So if I'm someone, I know for a fact that I'm someone who likes to take my own decisions. I don't like people taking decisions for me. I would rather take all my risks myself. Whether it works out or not, I mean, that's fine.
Sure.
But there are people who are more rounded, who want to segregate duties, etc. So I mean, if you want to go solo, that I did, I would recommend building a very strong team around you. So you need to surround yourself with really smart people, and you need to let them do their jobs. You can't control everything, and I think that's the way I work. My management style is that I've built a very strong set of individuals in my team that sort of take care of everything. So I don't feel the need for a co-founder. But I know some of my friends who've started their journeys, they have co-founders, and I think, again, I think it really depends on what you want, or what your journey, or it has to do with your very personal journey that you want to, go on, because it's very hard being a solo entrepreneur. I can see that today when I look back. Earlier I was very determined, and I used to not understand why people would have a co-founder, etc. And I used to get a lot of flack for it as well. Early on, I tried to raise funding for 335th, and the one thing that everyone used to tell me was that you're a single founder, you're a girl, and you're a single founder. How the hell should we fund you? And I think so. Again, I chose not to take that funding because I think it was not the right time for 335th. But again, different people have different journeys, and I think that's I was willing to wait it out and grow the firm and scale it in a certain manner. But some people choose the high growth model at the first point. So I think I think you would definitely need someone to sort of manage it, because it takes time to build your team as well.
I agree. Well said. So my next question is that, your own learnings, you must have seen so many of your friends. What are some of the mistakes most, and I'm going to say us, startup entrepreneurs make?
The biggest mistake I made, I don't know about the startup entrepreneurs, is, I had never failed. So I had no idea what failure was like, when I started. Everything was really great, and, there was no problem, etc., etc. I've always been a stellar student. I've got the right things. I've done everything I've wanted. I've always achieved, and it was my biggest dream is to build my company. And, I started and I had no idea. First, I thought, I knew everything. So that was the thing that, I know how this works. But I think there are no rules, and we should not try and put ourselves in these frameworks that everyone pushes at us. And I think this is a very business school thing. But I had to really unlearn a lot of stuff I learned at business school to really progress in my business. All the stuff that they teach you are just frameworks I personally think they're for the corporate general roles, management roles, and not for entrepreneurs. And I think just unlearning them, just getting yourself out of that mold of, this is how it's supposed to work. You would not know. I didn't know. And I thought, this is the way, ABC is the way to do it. But I did ABC and I did not get any results. So it was very interesting that I was like, okay, this is not working. What I've been taught, the formal academic education or even when you're working as a professional, you do a lot of work, but suddenly as an entrepreneur, it's just very different because there are no rules for you. You're working 24/7 and you're just trying so hard to make things work. And, that was the mistake. That was the biggest mistake. I thought I knew it all. But then very quickly into this, I realized I didn't know anything. And then sort of started from scratch, So I think, and it took a lot of time for me personally to accept that as well. Because, again, as I said, I had never seen, till date also, I mean, yeah, there have been a little bit of here and there, but like I have not really seen failure in a way, you know. So it was it was like a shock to my system, you know. This is the first time I'm stepping into something I have no idea about, and I thought I knew everything, but I didn't know anything.
Correct.
So, you know, to sort of first unlearn everything and then sort of learn everything again, that was I think one of the biggest challenges I've faced.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So my next question is on gender balance.
Okay.
You know, and I love to ask this question from all my lady guests, or I should say woman guests. You know, gender balance is being talked about everywhere, you know, in the corporate world, wherever you go. And you just mentioned that when you went to raise money, people said, why should we give it to you? You're a woman and you're solo. What are your views on gender balance in India? And what do you think we can do to improve this much faster?
My views on gender balance is that I don't think as a gender specific person. I think what I do is whether I'm a female or a male, I'd probably do the same thing.
Correct.
So I think it's, according to me, and I'm a woman and I get that, and I've faced a lot of harassment, I've faced a lot of, you know, apprehensions and all of that stuff because I'm a woman. But my husband is also an entrepreneur, and I see that he faces his set of challenges. So I would honestly, I think, anyone who's considering entrepreneurship, or, you know, even as a professional, I think one needs to be gender agnostic. I think whether it's in terms of setting your team, whether it's in terms of finding your fit in the company, I think one needs to take away from what you want to achieve as a professional instead of seeing as a woman or a man, because when you're working, there's no woman or man. Yes, there are aspects of it that we have to manage our lives outside of work, but I really don't see it even in my office. Like, we don't work I have a lot of very strong women working in my office, but there's no difference between them and the men working in office, you know. So I don't see it as a gender specific thing. I see it as a very gender agnostic thing. However, having said that, I think in terms of improving gender equality at work, the first thing we need infrastructure. Because, you know, I know that a lot of girls were very smart and used to work in 335th, couldn't work because, you know,
Decided to start a family.
Start a family is one thing, that's societal pressure, you know, that they get married and then people want them to just be at home or don't do something serious. You know, a lot of people, even I used to get this, that, you know, I got married 2 years back and people were like, oh, no, you know, stop working so hard now. You can just do this as a lifestyle. You know, like you get a lot of, people give you a lot of guilt. And I think, unfortunately, women are the biggest perpetrators of this guilt to other women, you know. No man ever told me, don't work so hard. My father never told me, don't work so hard, or don't go pursue your dreams. He was the first one to tell me that, you know, that you have to do what you have to do. There's nothing stopping you. I mean, you have everything that, you know, you could possibly need to build $1 billion company. But, you know, women are the one who are like, oh, you know, why do you have to work so hard? You're not cooking, you're not looking after your house. I mean, so first of all, one is infrastructure, where, you know, we need a secure, safe system. You know, I know that women, when they work late at night, like, I know that we all have these safety apps and we all have apps. I have to know that all women reach safe at home, you know, because that's my biggest concern at this point, you know, because we need to have the freedom to want to work at whatever time. So I think in terms of infrastructure, in terms of even like creating that atmosphere of safety for women to actually come, you know, like a lot of parents don't want their girls to work, not because they don't want them to work, because they feel so unsafe for them, you know. And a lot of women, they come from, say, someone from Lucknow. One of the women working in my team is from Lucknow, you know. She lives by herself. She comes to office at night, you know, honestly, after 9:30, if she's not answering her phone, there are people, her parents are calling office or calling me directly because, you know, they're like, where is my daughter? So, you know, one thing, if we really do need gender equality, one thing is we need to create an infrastructure where women feel safe to work, you know. Obviously, sexual harassment policies have to be extremely strong at offices, which is not the case in India, unfortunately, because it's still a very under the carpet sort of a thing. But women have, like, you know, I think, and that is something women have to raise, that yes, harassment happens, but everyone has to voice it, and companies need to take action. So sexual harassment policies have to be extremely stringent. they cannot be interfered with, you know, just because someone's boss is bringing an X amount of revenue and all of that stuff. Safety and security are the biggest. I personally think, in even more than getting married and all, safety and security is the biggest reason women can't show up to work or can't work late. You know, if somebody tells me that, oh ma'am, I have to leave at 6, I can't work. I mean, I can allow that for a day or two, but over a period of time, then I'll just have to make alternate choices, right? So I think that's one thing. The second thing is, as I said, like, we should stop giving guilt to women. Like, women are the biggest perpetrators of this patriarchal system that we have, this guilt that is pushed upon women, you know. No one in my family expects me to come home early and cook dinner or even make sure dinner is late, but I get a lot of guilt from a lot of women saying that, oh my God, you know, now you're married, you have a husband, you're living with your father-in-law, who takes care of the house. I mean, I have staff to do all of that. I don't really need to be there. I don't need, I mean, I'll make sure there's food on the table and all, but like, I don't need to be, you know, don't need to be felt guilty, you know, about the fact that I miss marriages, I miss events, I miss, I don't know, family gatherings and stuff, but I'm also like living my dream. I'm building something that, you know, you will be proud of tomorrow when you see that, you know, this girl has built this. I mean, I'm not the only one building it. My entire team is there. But, you know, but stop giving guilt to your women, to the women, to the girls of this country. Let them, honestly, let them just pursue their dreams. It could be anything. It could be as simple as doing pottery or being an artist, or just stop giving women a lot of guilt that we always get, you know. Stop. It has to stop. Really, it has to stop. And, you know, it's going to really change the way women can come into the workforce.
Well said. So, Poornima, my last question to you. And this question is about you personally. What would be 3 words that define you?
Interesting. The 3 words that define me is, 1, determined. I'm extremely determined. When I want something, I want something. There is no two ways about it. I'm very adaptable. I think the one thing that has really worked for me is that, you know, I love change. I don't like doing the same thing. So I'm very adaptable and I'm very flexible in the way I approach things. And third, I think commitment.
Okay.
It's the most important thing. If you want something, you have to be committed to it. You have to have conviction to back it up, whether it's with your own money, with your own time, opportunity, anything. I think commitment is something that I truly have.
Wonderful. So, Poornima, thank you very much.
Thank
you know, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I wish 335th a huge amount of success.
Thank you.
And as you mentioned, I sincerely hope you never see any failure.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for the Brand Called You. Thank you and see you next week.